my name is Lisa Saldine, and I'm a member of the project team. This is the first public meeting for the Lone Tree Overpass project. During today's meeting, members of the project team will be providing an overview of the project. During and following the presentation, they will also answer any questions. For today's meeting, we're using Zoom, where attendees can call in. Attendees will be muted during the presentation portion. If you have a question during the presentation on a particular slide, please enter it via the chat window in Zoom. The chat feature can be accessed in the menu settings. We will answer questions on a particular slide, but we'll hold general questions to the question and answer period. Following the presentation, participants can ask their questions live to our project team. If you would like to ask a question directly to our project team, please use the raise hand feature. You can raise your hand by clicking on the reactions button. For those on the phone, you will press *9 to raise your hand. I'll go over these instructions again following the presentation. Today's meeting will be recorded and posted to the project's website, which is lonetreeoverpass.org. You'll also be able to find the meeting materials, such as the project fact sheet and our project survey, on the website as well. There will be a link to the project website in the chat. I'm now going to turn it over to Christine Cameron with the City of Flagstaff to begin our presentation.
Thanks, Lisa. So welcome and thanks for joining. I am Christine Cameron, a project manager with the City of Flagstaff. This is the first public meeting on the Lone Tree Overpass. This is a project that's been under development for quite a while. The city performed an alternative study in the early 2000s, which included concept design and community engagement, and it was adopted by City Council in 2018. The project concept was put out to Flagstaff voters in Proposition 420, and it passed. And this proposition provided $73 million in funding for design and construction. The project intent, as presented to the community, is to provide an additional north-south corridor over the railroad and the future Rio de Flag, to provide congestion relief on other city streets, to enhance connectivity and circulation and increase safety. This project will be much like our 4th Street Bridge over Bnsf corridor over by the Aquaplex to the east, which has been a vital connection for vehicle, bike, and pet travel. In February of this year, a council awarded a design build contract to a team that includes Ames, our contractor, and WSP, the design consultant. Since February, the team's been working on development of the approved concept, data collection for the traffic analysis, and coordinating work with Bnsf Railway, the Army Corps, and ADOT. We've also been working on property acquisitions and relocations. With early direction from council, we've also strongly focused on enhancing and building upon the concept for bike ped safety through separated facilities. In addition to the overpass, the Lone Tree Corridor will also be enhanced down to Sawmill Road. And this is to provide a corridor with consistent improvements. The corridor funding was passed as part of Proposition 419, and that was in 2018 also. So tonight we'll go over what we've developed to date for the project scope, the intersection designs of Lone Tree and Butler and Lone Tree and Route 66, and the project aesthetics. Our next steps after tonight will be to take your input on the early design, and we'll also be presenting to council on October 19th, which is open to the public. We'll take that input and evaluate on how best to integrate your ideas into the project as we proceed with design. So this is the first of many meetings, and we'll be coming back as we make progress and to get further input. One thing that you will not see yet in the presentation tonight is the economic impact analysis study. That report is in review in draft form with city staff and will be placed on our project site and presented at a future public meeting. The project website is up and running, and we'll continue to populate that with project data. Our presentation will be recorded and linked there, and we'll also have a frequently asked questions document that will help capture the questions from tonight. We'll have a few natural breaks in the presentation as we shift topics. Again, as Lisa said, please put questions in the chat box and we'll work through additional pauses to provide, space in the discussion. In the meeting tonight, aside from myself from the city, we've got Rick Barrett, our city engineer, Jeff Bauman, our traffic engineer, Sarah Dector, our Comprehensive and Neighborhood Planning Manager, and Mark Revis, our Heritage Preservation Officer and Neighborhood Planner. And the last two people have been really instrumental on leading the charge with the Southside Plan. We also have the designer and contractor and subconsultants, which I will turn this over to Jason and let him introduce. So thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you, Christine. My name is Jason Karloftis. I am the design manager for this project. I work with WSP. We are the prime designer on this project, working for Ames Construction, who was our lead contractor. This is a design build project, meaning we have a contractor and designer working on this project together to deliver this project for the city. Ames is the construction. Our project manager for the project is Chris Keene. I'm the design manager, Jason Karloftis with WSP. We also have several sub-consultants working with the design team, including Peak Engineering. I believe Julie Lead has joined us tonight. We also have Wheat Design Group, who will be leading our aesthetics, landscape, and graphic support. I'm not sure if Laura was able to join us tonight or not. We also have Trans Systems Corporation, who's leading our rail design in support of the project. A couple of our leads have joined us as well. Joe Vaskovic is leading our traffic. Frank Fry is leading our roadway design. I believe he'll be joining us later. And Greg Van Bauer is leading our drainage project. And we have our project involvement team as well. So thank you all for joining us tonight. Trying to see if we have the slides. We have a little bit of technical difficulties tonight. So bear with us. We're having the slideshows a little bit delayed tonight. Yeah, so we will be walking through the project tonight, going through some of the intersection design options and some aesthetics, just to present this to the public. As we go through this, please remember this is a schematic design level. What that means from our perspective is we're about 25–30% through the design project. A lot of our goals for the schematic design is just to make sure our geometry set. We've begun coordination with our stakeholders. We got a lot of significant stakeholders on the project, including the Arizona Department of Transportation. I'll be using the term ADOT for them. Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railway. I'll be using Bnsf to when I refer to them. We have the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Road to Flag project. It's a flood control project that's been in design for quite a while for the city. So if you hear me use the term RDF, that's referring to the Road to Flag project, the flood control project. Then we have the City of Flagstaff, then we have Metro Plan and Mountain Line and several other stakeholders that we're working concurrently with on this project. So the slide you see before you is a general project overview for the project. To orient yourselves, you can see the north arrow here on the top left. North is basically up towards US 66, going left to right, a little bit crooked. Walking from the south end of the project, which begins down at Sawmill Road, we have the existing Lone Tree Road, which will have improvements all the way up to Butler Avenue. That will be crossing Franklin Avenue and Churchill along the existing commercial corner on the southeast corner. If you're familiar with this commercial district, it's got the REI, the Dutch Brothers, the Wildflower, a whole bunch of other commercial centers in the area. We'll be having improvements along Butler Avenue, roughly from existing Eldon Street over to roughly Gable, maybe all the way to Cottage. And then we'll have a new roadway that will be constructed as part of this project, beginning at Butler Avenue to the north, crossing Brannan, and then becoming a grade separated roadway. And what I mean by the term grade separated is that will be elevated over existing conditions. So this blue area is actually a bridge structure and tying into US 66. So the current topography is 66 is at a higher grade than Butler Avenue. And this grade separation will provide a grade separated crossing with the bridge over Eldon Corridor, which Christine will discuss in a little bit, the RDF project, the flood control project, Bnsf Railway, and then tie in at grade to US 66, which is an ADOT facility. So Christine, if you want to discuss the Eldon Corridor a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So the alignment you see here in the green for the Eldon Corridor is close to what was approved in the concept study. Because Brannan Avenue will no longer go east into the industrial neighborhood, the Eldon Cottage extension was developed to provide the parcels on the east side of the bridge access and also provide emergency vehicle access to that area. The concept currently shows a 2-lane street with curb gutter sidewalk that connects to the intersection of Cottage and Eldon, and goes east under the bridge and connects with Butler where Lumber Street currently is. The connection to Cottage was a little more vertical going north and running through Bnsf property, but they've now have plans for this area. So we've dropped the alignment a little bit to the south. You see that kind of that kink in the road. With the later development of the Southside Community Plan, which shows future civic space in the area and bike ped paths, we will be including those separated pedestrian and bicycle facilities with the new roadway corridor. We have 2 community plans and documents included in this general area. And what we're doing is working to accommodate both. There's a question on this on the comment form for tonight for the group to provide feedback, and we can of course take questions. And we have the exhibits from the Southside plan on the presentation a little bit later on, and we can also talk about it then. So thank you, Jason.
Yeah, thank you, Christine. So now we're going to go into a little bit more detail, segment by segment, just to sort of give a little bit more detailed breakdown to everybody. So this is the south segment. Again, north to south. South side is on your left side of your screen. North is on your right side of the screen. Our project limits do begin at Sawmill Road, and they're going to extend to the north along the existing Lone Tree Road up to Butler Avenue. There will be some intersection improvements, which we'll be discussing later on in this presentation. And what we are doing is going to be widening. It's currently a 2-lane roadway, 1 lane in each direction. We'll be widening it to a 2-lane roadway, mainly with a inside widening, which means we'll be reducing the median width to create an extra lane in each direction. We'll also have some outside improvements for the Foots Trail on the top of the page, which is the west side of the roadway, and some improvements for the existing sidewalk and addition of a northbound bicycle lane on the east side of the project. So what we brought up on the bottom of the screen is a typical section. This typical section is if you were standing looking south, so the east side, which is to the bottom of your screen, is on your left. The west side, which is the top of your screen, is on the right. And just walking through this typical section, you have a 6-foot sidewalk, a 6-foot northbound bicycle lane. This moves the bicycle lane off the street into a buffered bicycle lane off of the side of the roadway. You have 2 northbound lanes, a maximum 15-foot median island. Part of it will be reduced as we get to Butler Avenue for left turn lanes. You got 2 southbound travel lanes. Again, you got a buffer zone. Then you got your Foots Trail, which has a combination northbound, southbound bicycle lane and a 6-foot bicycle or sidewalk on the west side. This does maintain the existing west side Foots Trail that's out there now. And then we would have some potential outside landscaping outside of limits on both edges of the bridge. Going a little bit more detail of this project. So we are maintaining the Foots Trail connectivity that exists out there today. We are adding an additional lane in each direction, 1 northbound, 1 southbound. And we are also going to be doing, as part of this project, a warrant analysis at both Franklin and Sawmill. So currently at, again, some feedback. At Franklin, we have a signalized intersection. And then we have a, sorry, I'm getting feedback real quick, hold on. All right. So we have a signalized intersection at Franklin Avenue. We are going to do a warrant analysis, and what that means for us is that we are going to evaluate both intersections at Sawmill and at Franklin Avenue and evaluate which one is better for a signalized intersection, which one's better for a stop controlled intersection. If Sawmill is analyzed better for a signalized intersection, we may flip the intersections for a signalization between Sawmill and Franklin. If Franklin does evaluate better for a signalized intersection, we would keep the signalized intersection at Franklin. So that's part of the final design process of this project, is to evaluate those 2 intersections. So I believe we do have a question.
Yep. Christine mentioned that Brandon would no longer lead to the industrial area and that is where my office is. How will I get there?
So Jason, do we want to hop back to that overview?
Yeah, if we can go back. Yeah, so Brandon will still have a connection to Lone Tree itself. You can see Brandon right here is connected. It will be cut off from the northbound Lone Tree. There's a median that will come down. We'll show that in the next segment, actually. But there will be a maintained connection to southbound Lone Tree. So the one direction that would be cut off is if you are going northbound Lone Tree, you would not have access to westbound Brandon. So you would have to look through alternate access going to westbound Butler, then coming up Eldon, and then coming back through to Brandon. But there will be a right in, right out maintained at Brandon off the Lone Tree, and the driveway accesses will be maintained.
So does that capture the area where your office is to the citizen?
Christine, I don't think it does. I think that individual's office, and she'll correct if I'm wrong, is out in the area where the green line connects towards Butler.
Right. So you'll have three ways to get into the neighborhood. One is on Lumber. One is on Gable. Gable will probably remain unimproved for the moment. And then one will be on the Eldon Corridor. So it's hard to say specifically where you are and what access would be best for you, but we will not be cutting off access to any parcel.
Yeah, I hope that, and we'll go to the new segment to the north. So maybe that'll help clarify a little bit too. So we'll go to the next slide.
Okay, Annie, we won't leave this topic until you get the information you need. So yeah, go ahead, Jason. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Christine. All right, so this is the close-up of the next section. So hopefully this zooms in a little bit on the connections Christine was just talking about. So just to orient everybody, this is the new stretch of roadway that we're building. So this is going to extend Butler Avenue to the south. And again, your north arrow you can see here on the top left. And then we're going to tie into US 66 here on the north. This is a grade separated roadway. So you can see the bridge structure begins right about where Eldon Corridor is, and we'll elevate the roadway over RDF and Bnsf, tying into US 66 at grade. We begin to climb grade-wise from Butler Avenue, where we tie into Brennan on the west. We are about 5 or 6 feet elevated at this point. By the time we hit Eldon Corridor, we're at about a 20-foot elevation. Over Bnsf Railway, we're about a 24 to 25-foot elevation, and that's to maintain required vertical clearances over the railway per Bnsf standards. And then, as I described before, US 66 is at a elevated topography compared to Butler, and we're actually tying in at existing grade. We do have the existing foots trail system we are accommodating as well at US 66. You can see we have a split path. One's at grade just south of the US 66 corridor, and then we have a split path of 66 going underneath the bridge to provide a grade separated pathway for foots as well. Eldon Corridor coming off will provide some access to the east side parcels. We are also maintaining the Gable connection, as Christine mentioned before. So all these parcels are still accessible based off of current existing driveways, and the west side parcels are still accessible off of Eldon and off of the Brennan as a right in, right out. The only change in access is north, which is the only change in access will be northbound to westbound coming off of Brennan. So going a little bit more detail, highlighting the typical section. Again, this is oriented where the east is to your left, west is to your right. So this is as if you're looking from right to left, looking south. And this is a typical section on the bridge itself. We have the 6-foot sidewalk and the northbound bicycle path. Then we have the 2 lanes northbound. We got a median, that part of it becomes the left turn onto US 66 as you get closer to US 66. And we got the 2 southbound lanes. We are protecting the bicycles with a raised barrier. And then we have the Foots Trail with the combination northbound, southbound bicycle lanes and the 6-foot pedestrian or sidewalk path next to it. Just to highlight some key features, we are maintaining the Foots Trail connectivity. Just to highlight that Foots Trail too, we are connecting the US 66 Foots Trail to the Lone Tree Foots Trail. So this is providing enhanced connectivity on the Foots Trail system from the north side to the south side. We are providing 2 lanes each direction as part of this project. And we are providing the grade separation over Eldon Corridor, Bnsf, and RDF. So this will be another north-south corridor over Bnsf that you will not have to stop for train crossings during the morning and evening commutes. I think there was a question coming up.
Yes, we've had 2 questions. What will be the speed limit on the new roads? This relates to safety and noise.
That is a good question. I don't have that on right now. I believe we had a 30-mile-per-hour design speed. Christine, do you remember offhand? And
Yeah,
Frank probably wasn't able to join us right away.
I believe north of Butler on Lone Tree, the new extension overpass will be 30, posted 30. And south of Butler, I believe, will be posted 35. And Jeff Bauman's on the call. I think that's right, but please correct me.
Yeah, I believe that was what I had in my memory too. Unfortunately, Frank couldn't join us right away with another commitment. So yeah, so 30 north, 35 south, we believe, but we can confirm. And Jeff in the comments does believe they're the same speed limits, so yes.
One other question, will there be a signal at the intersection of the Eldon Corridor and Butler?
Currently, the Eldon Corridor and Butler are not planned to be signalized intersections. No, they with the proximity of the connections to Butler and Lone Tree. Typically, you don't want signalized intersections in that close of proximity to each other. So right now, the plan is to have them as a stop-controlled intersections. But the Eldon Corridor in general is still being evaluated. We're still early on in that evaluation process.
Yes, we've got one more question. Somebody asked about, how about 25 miles per hour?
We have set the design speed based on conversations with the city. So that is we do have design speed set. We continue to have conversations, but based on the traffic patterns and the purpose of the roads, that is the current direction we have from a design perspective, or for the use of these roadways. So I don't know, Jeff or Christine, if you guys have any thoughts from the city perspective on reducing speeds on this road to 25. And you're muted, Christine, if you're responding.
So Jeff, can you take that question?
Yeah, we're going to give them access, Christine, to Mike.
Okay. Is he still muted, Lisa?
Yes, he is. She's working on it.
Okay. We've got a couple more questions in the chat, Jason, when we get done with that one.
Okay.
All right. Hello, this is Jeff Bowman. Can you hear me?
Yep, we got you.
Awesome. No, I think you had a pretty good answer, Jason. I mean, we have design standards for all of these different types of streets. Lone Tree Road's an arterial roadway. Typically, design speeds would be 35 or 40 for that facility. I think we have gone with either 35 or 30 on the bridge section in our anticipation. We are anticipating posting that at 30. All the different types of streets in the city, from arterials down to local streets, have design speeds based on their function, as you were saying. So the function of this facility is to move people across the region or within the region. So typically these have higher speed limits and are designed safely to those higher speed limits. So 25 is not the design speed that is our accepted standard and wouldn't be appropriate for this arterial roadway through this section.
Okay. Appreciate that additional response, Jeff. I believe we have some additional questions that. Okay, Lisa's having some technical difficulties, so I think I can pull up chat. So let me catch up. What the business is. So sorry, I'm trying to catch back up with comments. I know I saw something about noise on the roadway. We have not done a noise evaluation on the overpass itself. Not sure if you had any comment on that, Christine. That's not been part of what we have done on part of this project.
Yeah, we don't currently have a road or noise barrier planned. And I thinking you live up on Cherry Hill on that Southern Street hilltop. I'm also up on the hill, and I do hear a lot of the city and Bnsf noise consistently, but we don't have anything additional as far as noise mitigation in this project for the Lone Tree Overpass crossing.
Okay. And we got another question from Annie Taylor. We already discussed that one. So we have another question. How will cyclists and pedestrians best cross Butler to reach Eldon Corridor? The most likely crossing will be the Butler Avenue and Lone Tree intersection. That'll be part of our presentation later on of how we are doing some multimodal enhancements at that intersection. That is a very big focus of this project, and how we move pedestrians and bicyclists across that intersection safely, and bring in their considerations into that intersection design. So that is probably the most likely, the safest crossing for everyone to use. Right now, there is no plan for a mid-block crossing. So that's probably where we would be directing everyone. So that's hopefully later on in the presentation when we get to there. Hopefully that'll help answer that question. And then going. Another question, there are residences nearby. What will keep their speed to what is posted? So speaking of Lone Tree Road itself, we do have, just with the general geometry of Lone Tree Road, with the distance we have and the curvature of the road itself, studies generally from a roadway design perspective, to gain speed, you generally have to have a long stretch of road without a lot of entrances and potential for ingress and egress, people turning on and off the road. So the natural geometry of this roadway with the curvatures we're looking at is sort of a deterrence for people gaining speeds beyond what we're designing it for. So that's one natural barrier we have of people not going above the posted speed limit. Outside of that, this is an arterial corridor. We're not currently looking at any traffic calming approaches. We don't typically look at having speed platforms or anything on these types of projects. So outside of law enforcement or other mechanisms like having speed limit signs that monitor or speeds of actual users, we're not currently incorporating traffic calming measures. But I think the geometry itself with that S curve that's naturally built in will be a natural deterrent for people speeding. We also have the intersections. This isn't a super long stretch of road where people are going to be gaining a lot of speed naturally as we come across Lone Tree roads. So hopefully that answers that question. Still going through the questions. Given the frequency of trains and its noise evaluation, for lack of a better word of relevant. Okay, so that's more of a general comment. All right, so it looks like the other ones are general comments. So if we missed a comment, apologies, we will circle back. So we're going to keep going through the presentation. If we have missed something, we are trying to get one of our computers back up. So I apologize if I did miss something, but we will keep moving forward. Julie says we did miss a comment about cyclists from pedestrians from Kaysen. So let me look at that real quick. How will cyclists and pedestrians best cross Butler to, no, we discussed that. I think cross Butler to reach Eldon Corridor. So again, yeah, that's going to be crossing at Lone Tree Road and Butler Avenue. Annie Taylor, trying to go back and find your comments. Southwest of Lone Tree, before East Brandon. Go out at Gable. So I'm not familiar with exactly where that southwest of Lone Tree.
I think Annie's talking, Jason, about back where you've got the image with the green line. She wants to know if if Gable has the median in front of it and she has to make a right turn. Will she have to make a right turn onto Butler and then U-turn somewhere? Or is she going, I think or is she going to have the ability to make a left out of that area?
Yeah, so on Butler itself, we're not changing any medians or any current movements on Butler itself. But you are losing the access at where Lone Tree itself is. So you would have to back out to Elden, which I believe does have, so you would have to be a right out at Elden, or you would have to go to the next street to the west, which I believe has a median opening. So that would be your impact. You have to go out Elden, right turn, and then come back around. The other option would be to exit back onto Brennan, go out at Lone Tree Road, and then make the left turn at the signalized intersection, because you do have a right out on Brennan if you're on the west side of Lone Tree Road. So I hope I got that question now, understanding where you're at.
I think she has a follow-up. She's thinking that her access would be at Gable, and that how would she get into the Eldon corridor if that's a road corridor?
Okay.
From that location. I think she's on that little road, her property. Sorry, I know Annie from past public engagement, and so thanks for coming tonight, Annie. But her building doesn't quite access at the green line. It's kind of between the green line and the red line. And so she really wants to understand what spot she's in for circulation there.
Okay. So the access to Eldon Corridor will be this point and at this point. So you'll have just continuous access from both points. So again, I apologize, I don't understand fully where you're coming from, but you would have, assuming you're coming from this corner, you get access to this road to get a right turn back to Lone Tree, or if you're headed, again, if you're headed to eastbound Butler, probably your recommended route would most likely be a right onto Lone Tree, and then out on the left to eastbound Butler would be your eastbound Butler most likely approach, because as a signalized intersection, you're going to have a protected left to exit out to Butler. Eldon would be a good option to have a right turn onto Butler westbound and then back onto Lone Tree if you're trying to go northbound. But you have an access at this point.
Annie, this is Christine. I'll follow up with you on a one-on-one just to make sure we're understanding what your access needs are. And again, this is concept layout, and if we need to make another driveway that gets to your parcel on 524 Brannan and gets direct access to that Eldon corridor, which you may not feel like you have in this schematic, we can talk about that. So I'll get in touch, and thank you.
All right. I do see a comment from Kathleen. We're going to get to that slide in just a second, so we'll address your comment when we get to that slide. All right. So, yeah, next slide. All right, so next stretch is US 66. So we are basically making improvements to US 66, starting on the west side, right around where Eldon currently hits US 66. And then we're gonna have improvements, not quite to Schweitzer Canyon. We're gonna be ending improvements right around where the mortuary is, more or less to give you sort of the extent of our limits. A lot of it will be depend on what we ultimately decide is the preferred intersection type. And again, that's gonna be part of our presentation later. 66 will be widened. Our goal is to widen to mainly to the south. So that's what you're seeing in this picture. Lone Tree, like I said, will tie into the south at the rough limits we're showing here. Typical section for the crossing, the north side is on your left and the south side is on your right. So we're looking, so if you're facing east, we do have a 4-foot shoulder that we understand some people use bicyclist lane or cyclist lane. We have 2 westbound lanes. We do have a median that will again be taken up partially by left turn lanes where needed. We have 2 eastbound lanes. We have a planned 5-foot bicycle lane going eastbound, and then we have a right turn lane going onto Lone Tree Road based on the volumes that we're projecting onto Lone Tree Road. Off of Lone Tree Road, we would have the Foots Trail connection. And as I mentioned before, we do have 2 connections. One's on the south side of the curb line, and that would be an at-grade intersection crossing. We would also have a grade-separated crossing of Foots going underneath the bridge to provide an uninterrupted crossing for people who don't want to cross at the intersections. We are providing an east-west connection to the north-south connection, and we're also providing a continuous east-west crossing for those who are just headed east-west that don't want to stop at the intersection. Going a little step further. We are trying to maintain the north curb line with most of our widening to the south, or all of our widening to the south if possible. We are connecting the Foots Trail, like I said, east-west, and we are aware of the city's plan to have the Schweitzer Mesa connection on the north side. So we do have plans to accommodate that with our intersection design. We are aware of that project and are making accommodations with our intersection concepts. Let me back up real quick so we can address Kathleen's comment. There will be potential impacts to these businesses. This is an ADOT facility, so as we are tying in this intersection into the US 66 facility, ADOT does have requirements for access control. We are early in this project, so we are still having those discussions with what those access limits will be and what those impacts of these properties are. We don't have those finalized at this time. We also know the Schweitzer Mesa connection likely will have some impacts in coordination with this project. So those are still being worked on. They are not fully evaluated at this time, but we do anticipate at least a couple of these parcels may be acquired as part of this project, and then the parking for the remaining parcels, because they're losing driveway access, may have to be reconfigured onto the change in parcels if we have some. So we're working through those. I don't have a full answer, Kathleen, to that question at this point, but it's something we are tackling during the next part of this project during final design. Hope that answers your question. I guess we have another question from Beth Tucker. How will the overpass link to downtown affect traffic? Example, Santa Fe to Eldon, then Birch. We have run a travel demand model as part of this project. So as Christine mentioned, we have a traffic impact analysis. Generally, this connection will become a heavily used network connection between these for vehicles from the south part of the community working north. We do project with that travel demand model that In general, the traffic volumes in the downtown area that are pass-through users, people who are just passing through on Milton and San Francisco and Beaver, those volumes are projected to go down. A lot of those vehicles will shift over to Lone Tree. Volumes going from Lone Tree eastbound on 66 will increase slightly, but vehicles going from Lone Tree west to downtown will decrease slightly on US 66. So generally downtown traffic, one of the goals that the Blueprint 2040, the city's commission and the traffic models are showing, is that there should be an improvement in traffic volumes generally in downtown, especially along the Beaver and San Francisco streets. You're eliminating that, or you're providing an additional grade separated crossing with BNSF. Users are going to want to use that, not get delayed at the traffic crossings. They're going to use this roadway to cross instead, and not use downtown area as a pass through. So for this north-south connection. So generally there should be an improvement for the downtown area. So hopefully that answers your question. And then checking questions as we go. I think I got everybody. Again, apologize. We lost one of our computers that was tracking questions. So apologize for missing someone. So if we missed one, please flag it in chat, and we're going to do our best to keep up with everybody. So continuing on, BNSF Railway Realignment. This is one of our key stakeholders on the project. Current BNSF Railway, they are at a higher grade than Butler. They're not quite as high as US 66 facilities, but to get this new roadway over their facilities, we do have to realign and lower their tracks through the project. So they are going to be a key stakeholder we'll be working with throughout the project life of this project, throughout the design life and through construction. In general, what our coordination has so far indicated, working closely with BNSF, is that we will have to shift their tracks to the south, and we'll have to lower it approximately 15 feet. One of our project goals and requirements from BNSF is that we'll have to maintain 3 tracks at all times. Currently, there are 2 mainline tracks that are in service. They have 4 siding tracks in the area currently, and to service their current volume of trains, we'll have to maintain 3 at all times throughout construction. We'll have to maintain those 3 tracks while we're lowering the grade approximately 15 feet right at the bridge. Giving you an example of what that looks like. This is the cross section at the construction center line of Lone Tree. You can sort of see Foot's Trail here, and then the existing 6 tracks at BNSF Railway here. The dash line is the existing grade, and the solid line here is the proposed finished grade. Rail to flag is shown over here, so you can see that's even lower than the proposed finished grade for the railroad. And you can see the grade difference here is about 15 feet, and we're going to be crossing their tracks with a single span for the bridge. So this is provided just to sort of give you a scale of how much we're lowering their grade, and the US 66 is over to the left here. So that's just trying to get you a scale of what's going on. We do have a...
I can take that question, Jason.
Okay.
Yeah. So Charlie, about the Florence to Walnut bike ped underpass that is actually to the west of Milton. That project is tied up together with the Rio to Flag, and this project is part of an overall project called the Downtown Mile. And the thing that kind of connects all of these are the relationship to the railroad and the impact to the railroad. And so we are working with BNSF to get both the Rio flood control, the Rio ped bike, and the Florence to Walnut ped bike, pushed underneath the tracks in an area that's a little bit, further to the west of the Lone Tree. So we won't be doing it at the same time, but we do hope that the Lone Tree helps us with some of the BNSF mitigation items that helps facilitate the construction of our other local projects. Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, thanks, Christine. Yeah, and Sarah, we did see someone has their hand raised. We are going to try to take phone questions at the end of the presentation, if possible. if that's okay with you, Christine, or do you want us to take these as they come up?
I think we're good. Let's, if we can kind of
We're
move
at the end of the
forward.
session.
Yeah, we're running out of time, and I want to make sure we try to finish for everyone that's here. But we definitely won't leave anyone without an answer or a future contact. So.
Okay, thank you. Moving forward, at the end of the project, BNSF does have 6 tracks, and we will try to finish the project with 6 tracks per our discussions with BNSF. What we're going to be showing here is a visualization of the project. Hopefully it gives everyone a sense of the scale of the project. Again, I want to re-emphasize to everybody that we are at schematic design. You're going to see some just placeholder aesthetics. They're not intended to represent the aesthetics of the project. We are not at final geometry. We're not at final design. So please be aware that what you're looking at is about a 25 to 30% design level. I will pause the graphics at certain points to try to highlight some certain items, but hopefully this gets everyone a sense of how everything's interacting together from a visual standpoint. Oh, there we go. We're going to play it. So this is a bird's eye visualization starting from the south and going north. And you see here, you got the Lone Tree coming on along the east side. You got Bnsf Railway. RDF is an open ditch coming through. I'm going to try to pause it here. Oh, I'm not able to pause it. So we will restart that and I'll try to talk over. Then we have some stills that we're able to share. Oh, let me go back to. Sorry. Yeah, so again, we're starting from the south side, zooming into the north. We have a 4-lane roadway. You can see an intersection at Lone Tree and US 66 to your right. Rio de Flag is a open ditch channel coming through the project. We got our 6 lanes of tracks. You got the Foots Trail coming in underneath the bridge there. You also see it coming on along the south corridor, coming along the west side of the structure now. You can see we have a detention basin is what you're seeing along that retaining wall on the Eldon Corridor. We're still in the early phases of doing final design. It's going to be a mixed use multimodal facility and corridor. There's Brannan with that connection coming in. We have retaining walls supporting Lone Tree, and we're going to switch over to a fly through. This is going east to west of Rio de Flag. Then we're going to turn back around just to show the open space of Eldon Corridor underneath the bridge. And then again, there's a detention basin, which we'll discuss a little bit later, adjacent to a retaining wall. Again, those aesthetics are just a placeholder. And that's sort of a visualization, just so you can see the structure. Going into the stills, just to highlight some items. So we are proposing a 4-span bridge. We got the first span over Eldon Corridor, and we got the RDF open channel, and then we got the 6 tracks of BNSF, and then we got a span over the Foots Trail on the north end, tying into the intersection of US 66. Go to the next slide. This is a shot of the US 66 intersection. You can see that we have the right turn lane coming in. We have a Foots Trail connection going east-west from 66 going to south, connecting to that north-south connection along Lone Tree. And you can all see down here, we got the east-west grade separated connection. And I see a question about the civic space. We will talk about that later on in the presentation. So I appreciate your question, Michelle. And thank you, Dina, for the separated bike lanes. We appreciate that input. And then again, about the Eldon Corridor and the question about civic space, we'll talk about that later as mentioned, but this is the detention basin. We'll also talk about potentially repurposing this for open space later on. But that's sort of just a visualization. Hopefully it helps everybody picture a little bit better than the plan views of what's going on in this project. So I think we addressed everybody's questions. We'd like to move into intersection design. We want to focus on the intersections of Lone Tree and Butler. and then Lone Tree and 66. The real keys we want to get into is just sort of decisions our teams found during a schematic and made, and then some input we're seeking back as part of these projects. So our approach to intersection design, just to cover real quickly. So what we've done is we've collected data. We've coordinated with the regional transportation model and metro plan. We've coordinated with ADOT for the US 66 alternatives, and we've evaluated the data we've collected. What we're currently doing is we're evaluating the intersection types. We're coordinating with the city's commissions, transportation commission, sustainability commission, or committees, and then we're having this public meeting here. And what we're doing next is we're trying to compile the feedback and getting a decision on the final intersection types with the multimodal enhancements, and I'll explain a little bit what that is. And then we're going to present to council on October 19th our recommendations for final intersection decision types. So Lone Tree Road and Butler Avenue, we'll start there on the south end of the new corridor. We did look at several intersections and determined that for this location, there's really only one viable intersection. That's traditional. What you're seeing on the right here is a aerial view of a traditional intersection. You're not seeing the traffic signal poles here. So this is just sort of a really early schematic visualization to give you an idea of what it might look like. We did look at other intersection types. We looked at roundabouts. We looked at a sort of a divided highway type system where you would pass through the intersection and take a U-turn to get back to increase some efficiency by eliminating the U-turns at the intersection itself. We evaluated 4 other intersection types. We evaluated these intersections based on right-of-way efficiency, lowest impact to adjacent properties. You can see we have the commercial center on the southeast corridor. We do have Butler going east-west here, and Lone Tree going north-south in this picture. So you can see we have the commercial district on the southeast corner. We got existing building right on the northeast corner. We got some properties on the northwest, and then we have a little bit of open space on the southwest corner. We also looked at the traffic volumes that were predicted by our models. And then we also really focused on the multimodal impacts on this project. We have the Foots Trail on the west side and really wanted to focus on how do users get across this intersection. So for this intersection type, after you address those, most of the other intersection types that we would have considered at this location would have had significant right-of-way impacts. They would have taken more room, would have taken more buildings and property acquisitions to implement, or they just don't work with the traffic volumes that our traffic models are predicting are going to be using this intersection based on the traffic data we have. So moving forward, this was our recommended intersection type for this location. That's not to mean that we have final design. And this is the pedestrian perspective. This is if you're at the southeast corner. Southeast corner looking to the northwest. So again, this is Lone Tree, and then this is Butler coming right to left. So this is a pedestrian perspective of what that intersection would look like. We do have a quick question, why is Butler so wide in the illustration? And this is, I can go back one. So Butler's showing what the intersection models are predicting will be required at this intersection. So we got 2 through lanes, a left, 2 through lanes the other direction, and a right turn lane. Coming from the other direction, we have other direction, we have 2 through lanes, 2 lefts, 2 through lanes, and a right as well going on to Lone Tree. So the width of Butler is based on the traffic volumes that our traffic models are showing we have there. So that hopefully answers your question, Charlie. And the total number of lanes is still something we're discussing and evaluating, but current traffic volume numbers are really what's driving the intersection widths. Same with Lone Tree, the lane types and lane numbers are being driven by what the traffic models and travel demand models are showing us. But going back to the multimodal impacts, and this is really one of the things we're looking for feedback from everybody, is there is a national guidelines that we want to bring into this intersection design. This is a national guidelines from the National Association of City Transportation Officials, NACTO. It's called Don't Give Up at the Intersection. It's really some national guidelines have been developed that really focuses on how do we bring multimodal users back to our streets, back to our intersections. And the big focus of it is how do we enhance a feeling of safety and bring actual safety for multimodal users at our streets and our intersections. So this has really been our guiding principle, and it's given us our toolbox for our intersections. And so what you're going to see on the next couple slides is sort of the toolbox that they provide and recommendations they're going to provide. So these are options that we've considered bringing to our intersections and ideas that we can bring in. So this is an example of using median islands and setbacks for the vehicles. And this basic concept, you set your stop bar quite a bit ways back from your median island. And someone did say they liked the one before the NACDO slide. I guess Sarah, but you set your stop bar back. The whole goal of this concept is you get your pedestrians, which are using this yellow and white crosswalk, and your bicyclists using the green crosswalks. You're separating those two modes of pedestrian and bicycle usage. You get them in front of the cars. It gives them a staging area where the cars can visually see who's about to cross the road, and giving them a clear sight distance to let them know who their potential, the users of the crosswalks are well ahead. Normally you'd have a stop bar right in front of the corner. You'd have your crossing bar, so your car would normally in a traditional intersection be way up here. So you don't have as big of a staging area. So this is a becoming more and more common approach where you have room to have these setbacks. So this is one consideration NACDO brings. Another concept they're bringing forward. All right, what's my mouse? Is use of high visibility crosswalks. Going back to the last picture, that's the green crosswalks and bike lanes. It just is a change in color, so it's high visibility for users. For this example, it's being used for a bike lane. You can sort of see they're also using it for a staging area instead of a raised curb and median island. You can also use it for enhanced signing for bicyclists. So this would be a good use of enhanced signing for the northbound cycling lane we're talking about on the east side of Lone Tree, for example. You can also use thicker lanes, different types of crosswalks, all to bring a higher visibility to the intersections. So that's another concept we can bring. We can also use delayed signals for the vehicles, where you actually have signals for the pedestrians or for the bicyclists that let them enter the intersection ahead of the vehicles. So while the vehicles are still on red, you might have a signal head where the cyclists and the pedestrians get a green 2 or 3 seconds ahead of the vehicles, and they're in the intersection ahead of the vehicles. So you actually get a little bit of a decrease in level of service for the vehicles, but the pedestrians are out in front. Vehicles who are often looking at oncoming traffic to their left, if they start to make their movement, the vehicles are out in front, or the pedestrians are out in front, they can clearly see them as they start making their right turn movements. An example of this on the next slide, showing the pictures. These are signal heads. You can see a little bike symbol in the signal heads. So it's just a signal timing that you can bring into your intersection to try to increase multimodal safety. You can also use island medians. We'll show a picture of this coming up, but the intent of this is like if you have a right turn lane, you can add a median island. What this does is it shortens the crossing for pedestrians and cyclists. You're crossing one lane, you have a refuge before you cross the through lanes to the median. So it just shortens your crossing timing or lets you stagger your crossing timing over multiple features. You can also have separated bike lanes where you have a curb, or here you have a barricade of some sort that actually separates the bicyclists from the travel lane, a deterrent from vehicles swerving into the bicycle lanes. The city is actually implementing something similar to this on Butler Avenue itself coming up, so we're aware of that and look into how we can integrate that into this project as well. Another option for vehicles is offset lefts, and what this concept does is instead of your standard left where you're set really far from the oncoming traffic, you start shifting your left turn lane further to the left, so you get a better sight line where you're not being blocked from the oncoming left. So for example, instead of sitting on the right side of your median, you actually shift to the left side of your median. You can get better visibility of your oncoming vehicles from the through lanes. This reduces conflicts from the left turn to oncoming vehicles just by improving visibility. It also provides a potential refuge for pedestrians, shorter crossings with the timings and stuff. So these are all concepts we brought to our intersection design, trying to figure out what's best for these intersections. So going back to Lone Tree Road and Butler Avenue, and these concepts can be applied to both Butler and US 66. So keep that in mind as we go through this. But traditional intersection, this is basically no enhancement. Oh, there's very minor enhancements. We do have the separated bicycle lanes and pedestrian lanes. But other than that, we don't have refuge islands. We don't have a dedicated right turn lane where we're separating them for the island. So this is a pretty basic traditional intersection, but bringing some of those NACTO concepts in. You know, this is a concept we could bring in where we have refuge island, for example, for the right turn lane. You got short crossing coming on the southwest corner. You have a refuge island staging area for your pedestrians and bicyclists. Shortens the crossing across Butler. We had the comment before that Butler looked really long for a crossing. You know, and unfortunately, you know, you can't apply it at all four corners all the time. You have a building here that if we applied it in the northeast corner, you know, we'd have to demo the building to apply it, but maybe it becomes viable at the northwest corner if we have some additional right-of-way acquisitions. If, you know, it could be potential on the southeast corner right now. Southwest corner is the one we're showing it just as an example of what we're doing. But that's sort of the concept we could bring in with some of these enhancements, just to sort of try to promote the multimodal concepts. So hopefully that's sort of an introduction to sort of some of the concepts we're bringing and some feedback. This is a pedestrian view, again, southwest or southeast corner. We'll try to work on, for maybe the website, a view from the southwest corner that would show that median island a little bit better, because that's probably the better enhancement from this this example. Going to the comments real quick.
Yeah, Jason, I think there's a question from Beth asking what kind of considerations for these NACTO scenarios there is for snow coverage, and maybe, though I might be speculating, but maybe even snow removal from these sorts of improvements.
Yeah, so maintenance is always top of mind when we discuss these improvements with the city. I mean, even down to what type of drainage we're doing it. You know, we have curb cuts for low impact design requirements to try to get some drainage into these infill areas for vegetation and stuff. That's something we're always bringing up. Going back to example, the median, you know, it does change your snow removal habits. If you're coming with a snow plow here, you don't necessarily want to store your snow on this median because it makes it unusable. So you may have to change your operations where you're carrying your snow to somewhere else, or you're doing a secondary snow removal from this island. Coming around the corner, it doesn't change much, but those are ongoing discussions we're having during design. We are, again, preliminary design, so as we bring these in, those are going to be ongoing conversations we have during the final design. So the city's thought it through, we've thought it through as designers, and if there's something we can accommodate something, maybe we provide a little bit more area for storage, or some other approach we can come up with, we'll incorporate that where we can. So I hope that answers that question. Any other questions on the Lone Tree Butler before I move on to 66? I don't see anything in the chat currently.
I think you addressed why it's gotten wider, and then I know there's there's some other questions, like the person on the phone may have a question at some point. So
Yeah.
We'll just let you keep going so we can get to the final Q&A, and the person on the phone can go first.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Moving to Lone Tree in US 66. Again, I want to keep everyone to keep in the back of your mind, the multimodal improvements can be applicable to all the intersections you're seeing as well for 66. I'm not going to go through everything again, so keep those in the back of your mind. We did evaluate several intersections for 66 as well. There were a lot more viable intersection types here, just based on the volumes and the geometry of a T intersection. We did have 2 non-viable intersections just to sort of show some of the things we considered. One is a jug handle, and that's shown on the left side here. This concept actually has a left turn exit to the right and then become a through movement instead of a left turn movement. This is a concept used in the East Coast. Operationally, this works actually pretty well because you are eliminating a left turn movement in the signal phase. However, as you can see, there's a large footprint required. You're taking out a lot of businesses. It's also a new intersection type that doesn't meet driver expectations. There is a lot of tourism as well. So this was sort of considered non-viable just because it'd be the only intersection of this type in Flagstaff. There'd be a pretty large learning curve, we felt, for this intersection type, especially for people who are only there for the weekend or non-residents in the area. So this was sort of considered non-viable for those reasons. We also once again revisited Roundabout at Lone Tree and 66. This was borderline viable, but the volumes are fairly high, especially the eastbound, westbound, and then the turning movements from westbound to southbound and eastbound to southbound for Lone Tree. A lot of our, like I said before, a lot of our northbound to eastbound movements are pretty high too, but we can take care of those with a direct right in the roundabout concept. However, because they were borderline for a roundabout, and then you introduce pedestrian and multimodal crossing movements, the roundabout concept tends to break down, especially when you start considering we might have a northern Foots Trail connection with the Schweitzer Canyon concept or Mesa Schweitzer concept. And the whole intersection concept really starts breaking down, especially for a 2-lane roundabout. And once it starts breaking down, once you start introducing the multimodal concepts, we just, considered it, talking with ADOT, because it is an ADOT facility, that it became a non-viable just with the volumes we were seeing. It's close to maximum, and with the multimodal crossings, and once multimodal crossings start shutting down the through movements, it just became a non-viable option at this location. But we did want to show everyone that we did consider it and tried to make it work, and it just wasn't something that wasn't working out with the modeling. So that left us with 2 viable intersection types. One, again, is a conventional intersection. This is very similar to Lone Tree and Butler, but it's a 3-legged intersection, a T intersection, so you're just missing the northern leg. Then we have a Florida T. This concept may be new to some people, so I'll spend a little bit of time talking about it. So US 66 is left to right. Lone Tree is coming in from the south. The big difference in this concept from the conventional is your westbound movement is continuous. It does not stop. There is no signal phase. So, but every other movement, so the eastbound movement and then the left turn movement for northbound Lone Tree to westbound is signalized. The left turn movement would actually enter onto this additional westbound lane and then eventually merge into the continuous westbound lane. So operationally, this works really well. The continuous westbound would only stop when there's a pedestrian activated signal for when users are trying to cross on the west side of this intersection. Like I said, operationally, this works really well. One of the drawbacks of this intersection is you do not have crossings on the east and west side of the intersection. Because of the continuous nature of the westbound movement, there's not a good location to put a east side crossing. Other than that, this is a fairly viable concept type to explore for final design. Of the 2, the conventional intersection does operate marginally better of the 2, especially when you bring in the multimodal operations, but they are fairly close. Going on to, I just want to give everybody wrong one, sorry. Give everyone a little bit of a bird's eye view and close-up view of the 2 intersections before I get the questions. This is a aerial view of the Florida T. This is without pedestrian enhancements. So again, the same enhancements we showed, there is a median refuge island here on the right turn. The same type of enhancements we showed at Lone Tree and Butler could be applied here. So keep that in the back of your mind. We just didn't show them in our visualizations at this point. because we're just trying to get a side-by-side comparison. But again, coming off a Lone Tree, your left turns would enter this lane here and eventually merge. Your westbound is continuous unless stopped by a pedestrian activated signal. Eastbound direction would be signalized. Westbound to southbound would be signalized, and northbound to westbound would be signalized. And your right turn would be dedicated right. The decision is still to be made whether that would be continuous or stop controlled. The decision has not been made yet. The safety of the pedestrians crossing here is a big awareness of our team, and so we are aware that continuous right does introduce a little bit of a safety hazard if they're not stopping, considering that pedestrians may be crossing here. So that decision is still to be determined. Going down to a pedestrian level, this is at the southwest corner. So this is looking, you have your continuous or northbound to westbound movement over here. This is looking at your refuge island for cross your right turn lane, and then you would cross to the north along this crosswalk. So that's where it gives you a pedestrian look at what your crossing would be like. Going to the traditional intersection. Again, you got US 66 going top to bottom, and you got Lone Tree coming in from the right. And this is, again, we don't have signals or anything shown here, so use your imaginations if you're able to, but we do have crossings on both sides of the intersection. Again, we have your refuge island here and at the median. Same on the north side or the east side, we do have a refuge island at the median. We do have enhanced crosswalks, so a little bit of the multimodal safety. And this would be a fully traditional, this would be traditional, so you'd have signalized at every direction, and the same type of improvements we're talking about down at Butler could be applied here. So going back to questions real quick. So
First, Jason, this
yep.
is Sarah. I'm going to help you with the question, so you don't have
Okay.
to keep flipping back and forth. I think the
Appreciate
first
that.
question about this intersection was, are there bus stops at this intersection or nearby? Because folks don't see pullouts at the in the illustration, and maybe that's something Jeff might or Christine might have to jump in and answer too.
Yeah, so we have talked to Mountain Line, and there currently aren't any identified bus stops that we've been made aware of on this corridor. We will continue to revisit them throughout design, but currently I don't believe there are any planned bus routes that would use this corridor, is my understanding. And Jeff and Christine, I don't know if you guys have heard anything more since we last visited with Mountain Line.
Well, there is the 66 route that would use the east and westbound only. I think that's possibly what they're asking. Is like
Understood. It's not Lone Tree itself.
not necessarily is there one that's going to turn south on Lone Tree, but does the existing line for Route 66, which is also the name of the bus route that goes on this route.
And that we would be
which is a
still
confusion.
coordinating. Okay. Yeah, I thought you were talking Lone Tree itself.
All right.
So we are coordinating with Mountain Line. They are one of our stakeholders we are communicating with, and we would be coordinating bus stops. It has not been incorporated yet into our design. We are schematic at this point, but we would coordinate with them where they feel they would need a bus stop and incorporate it into our design as necessary.
And from my conversations with them, which I think this is to answer Charlie's question of could they be through on this end, you know, Mountain Line does not want to use this bridge necessarily, because once where the DCC is located, once they're south of the tracks, they want to stay south of the tracks because of the delay caused by trains. And so they might use it northbound, but then they'd have to cross the tracks again to get to the DCC. So just operationally, this intersection is not the best place for buses to move south and north.
Yeah, I appreciate that input. And I think Charlie followed up too, asking about Butler. And yes, we would have that coordination on Butler as well. I believe they're mid-block away from Lone Tree. Last we talked to them.
Another question in the chat that I think I may not fully understand. So Beth, please message if I don't. Is a question that I believe is have we considered a Florida T at all on Butler as a way of providing better access to Eldon, which I think that's what's being asked there, but I may be
So-
missing some things in that question.
You know, Florida T's only work at a three-legged intersection. So at Butler and Lone Tree itself, it does not work. Currently Eldon, where it connects, so you're talking at Eldon to Butler, I believe that is not going to have, so that's still very, very, very early on in the design. So it's not been fully vetted, but I believe early talks is there would not be a median cut at Eldon due to the proximity at the intersection. But we will continue to look at that, but I believe that's the current direction where we're headed, just because of the proximity and the need for the left turn lanes and the storage lengths going on to Lone Tree from Butler.
So Beth said I got close to her question, but might not have hit it. So maybe it'll be a better one to ask when we're unmuting people at the end.
Yes, I think Annie followed up on that. So how will someone go east on Butler from Eldon? So going east on Butler, if you're coming from that sign or side of the project, again, I think from my perspective, and again, Eldon is early in design. One possibility would be to take Eldon to the west side of Lone Tree to Brennan, then go from Brennan on a right turn to Lone Tree and use Lone Tree at the signalized intersection to go to, wait, you're going, yeah, to eastbound. So you could take a left off Lone Tree to go eastbound Butler. That would be a signalized protected left. So that would be one possible route. A little bit out of your way, but it gets you to a signalized left from Lone Tree to Butler.
So Annie, this is Christine again. My information is on the invitation and it's also at the end of this presentation. So please reach out and send me an email with your contact information. I'll come out to your property, walk the property with you and go over the plans one-on-one. I think that would probably be the best to kind of demonstrate. So thank you.
I do see a question from Sally Page regarding semis. I think you're referring to semi trucks on this vehicle. Hopefully I'm reading that correctly. So yes, all these facilities are designed for all the standard highway vehicles. We are looking at turning radii when we run these intersection designs. So they will be designed for the standard what we call a WB67, I believe is the truck turning radius we are looking for. So they will all be accessible, at least the main, Butler and 66 and Lone Tree. When we get into the driveway accesses and some of the side streets, maybe the Lone Tree to Brandon, we'll have to evaluate what the needs are. I believe Brandon will be accessible by the same vehicle as well. So I hope I understood your question correctly. I think we caught all the questions.
You're caught up right now. I'm sure they'll, until we get to where we're starting to unmute.
All right, I'll turn it back real quick to Christine to give an intro to aesthetics.
Great, thanks, Jason. So for the aesthetic conversation, we first needed to work with Bnsf and the Army Corps on how the bridge needs to span the corridor and what that means for foundation and bridge type requirements. Tonight we'll be taking input on enhancements that can be added to our initial design to make it visually appealing and to tie it to the Flagstaff and Southside community. Aside from the bridge, another opportunity for project aesthetics will be corridor landscaping. The Southside plan also includes civic space that will be added to the area in the future as those projects are funded and programmed. We have taken the approach on the Lone Tree project to see how we can design our project to make the integration of the future civic space, around the bridge easier. Budget may be a constraint depending on what ideas, we hear. But ideas from today that may not be feasible can be carried forward and placed in the Southside community plan if that's what the group wants. So for the bridge aesthetics, we wanted to get you thinking about like what types of elements you would like to see and what subject matter you would want depicted, and what you don't want to see. Mountain Line's future downtown connection center on Phoenix Avenue is a little ahead of us in this process. They've been having public meetings, and subject matter that we've heard from the public on that location are local concepts like dark skies, the sawmill, the lumberyard, the railroad, indigenous culture, Southside heritage. So please provide input on how you want the area to look and feel. You know, do you want it to be, you know, traditional and stately for the bridge, or creative and eclectic, or, you know, what best fits, you know, your community and your neighborhood. Both detailed comments and general ideas are all welcome as we go through the slides. You know, on Butler, we've got large timbers and ironwork in the median for a nearby example. You know, tonight is really just a high level introduction. We will continue to work with you, the public, our city beautification staff, and BPAC, the Beautification and Public Art Committee, on developing the elements. So that's my introduction, and take it away, Jason.
All right, thank you, Christine. All right, so yeah, I'm just going to be highlighting some areas of the project where we can incorporate aesthetic designs, and just to reiterate with what Christine said, whatever you see here, they're just placeholders. We're not intending to show anything we've committed to for design. It's just intended to show where we can incorporate design elements. So I think the biggest area where we can incorporate aesthetic, or rustication is what we call when we incorporate stuff into concrete or bridge elements. So you'll hear that term from me when I say rustication. It's in the bridge abutments and retaining walls. That's what you're seeing here when you see the sort of stone texture pattern. These are elements that can be, you know, 2-3 inches deep or extruded from the concrete, and they can be artwork, they can be patterns, repeatable patterns, they can be panels. It really open. We can be flexible, and we're going to bring up some examples of what some of those things can look like. So we can get creative, we can get standardized. We have landscape areas under the bridge. We got some picket fences coming in. This is a fence that's separating users from Bnsf Railway. We do have some limitations when we're dealing with some stakeholders like Bnsf, but we do have some flexibility where we can get some creative ideas in. We got fencing along the bridge, and you'll see some pictures of some elements and artwork we've done on other projects. We got barriers where we can incorporate some rustication along the bridge. So these are all pallets, that's the other term I'll be using, or rusticatable areas that we can use to incorporate some artwork and some beautification to the project. So those are the areas we really want everyone to start focusing on, and think about what we want this project to look like when we're all said and done. So this is an example of rustication on a retaining wall. These are panels that were, I believe they were cut steel, and they were put on the structure later. So you can do this approach, or you can do something cast into the concrete. We'll see an example of that shortly. This was an artwork piece over multiple panels. So that's one approach we can use. Next example, this is a rustication that was cast into the concrete, and not a repeatable pattern, or not a repeated pattern, but it has variable depth to give some you know, some depth and to the structure, give it like a little bit of wood pattern. So we can get creative like this and do some really cool things now with different forms. You know, we have some landscapeable areas along the walkways on the bridge itself we can incorporate. We got the user side of the fence and some barricades. We can put some monuments or gateway features as you're walking onto the bridge. Do we want a monument or a historical marker or some other feature that tells a story about the community or the history of the community? You know, those are things we can try to incorporate into the project. This goes to the fence artwork. This is again pressed metal that was attached to a bridge down in southern Arizona. That incorporated some aesthetic elements on the corridor, and then we have rustication on the barrier itself. Again, this was pattern used multiple areas on the corridor to create a theme for the corridor. Christine mentioned that there are other aesthetic elements through the corridor, and if we want to bring those patterns into this project, we can, or we can incorporate new concepts. And we do have a wheat design group who have worked on transportation projects all over the state with multiple communities, and done a lot of creative stuff, working with individual groups, artists, and transportation owners to really bring ideas and find practical solutions for concepts like these in transportation projects. This was actually one of their designs down in Tucson, where they put a pocket park into a new pedestrian underpass. Is actually under a UPRR bridge tunnel bridge, to provide a gathering area for their community. They incorporated some local artist work with some pedestals, some seating area, and some landscaping. So again, a little gateway feature to that bridge and a gathering area for the community. Again, we have a lot of landscapable area, especially between 66 and the Foots Trail. Got less as you go further south, but we'll sort of try to highlight some areas as we go forward through these slides. So this is the south end of the project. We have that detention basin I mentioned earlier. Our goal of this detention basin is to make an area that's landscapable and usable with the community. We can adjust the size and depth and slopes. Our goal is really to make this a usable area, a place where kids can go out and throw a ball, or families can go and have a picnic out there. This is something the city of Tucson's done, and they've turned actually some detention basins into soccer fields down at some of their parks. So we want to try to capture, if we have to have spaces that we have to have some engineering features, we want to make it usable for the community at the end of the day. So these are things we look forward to working with everybody on. Outside these limits, we may have some areas that we're just accommodating future work by others, but where we have elements, we want to try to incorporate what we can. We got some potential landscapable areas underneath the bridge outside of Eldon Corridor. And then sort of an aerial view. Again, we have the area between Foots and US 66. This area you're seeing down here, that's being done as part of the RDF project by the Army Corps of Engineers. But as we get further south, you'll have some landscapable areas along Eldon Corridor itself, on the outsides of the roadway. And then as Christine mentioned, we are trying to make this project accommodative of the elements from the Southside neighborhood plan. We are providing this extra span and trying to create as much space vertically and horizontally as possible in this section of the corridor. We also are providing retaining walls along both sides of Lone Tree to try to capture as much usable space for the community as we can provide. You can see the retaining wall here, and as I mentioned, the detention base, we want to make this capturable and usable by the community. We're really trying to capture as much space as we can so we can incorporate it into the future plans. That's part of that Southside neighborhood plan. If we can find spots where we can have gathering spaces or little pocket parks, we're keeping an eye out for those areas. And if it's, possible to provide that space or incorporate that space, we're working towards to at least identify those and then work to where we can. Bringing up the Southside neighborhood plan, this is something we look at, and Wheat Design Group and our design team is aware of, and we're working with, incorporating where we can. We're aware of their plans for future civic spaces. We've eliminated these fill slopes that was shown in this scenario 1 to create as much open space as possible each side of the bridge. We're also aware of scenario 2, and the potential reuse of the area underneath the bridge. And that's why we've provided as much horizontal space and vertical space that's practical with the bridge design. We have about 17 or 18 feet of vertical space under the bridge, and we got a span of about 130 foot horizontally. Currently we are showing Eldon Corridor taking up part of that space, but we do have usable space outside of that. So we're aware of all these elements and what the community's shown in their desire in this plan, and trying to incorporate elements where we can and provide it for the community.
Jason, there were 2 questions.
Yep.
On the about the aesthetics. First one is a question about lighting, because we're clearly showing these illustrations as daytime, and yeah, I think this was a common theme in the South Side, that people were worried what the security would look like in an underpass area that's near the neighborhood. So what could you say about lighting options that are being considered for this, for the aesthetics that are being looked at and really haven't been programmed yet, but we're just trying to make sure they're part of our thinking early on?
Yeah, so lighting will take two forms on this project. You're going to have one underdeck lighting, which will be in this area. Wherever we have pedestrian areas, safety is a definite feature. The other area would be the Foots Trail on the north side. So that's all part of final design. We have not incorporated any of that into our schematic design, but you would anticipate having lights along this wall and likely along this pier. And we have light designers that would make sure the lumens and light analysis have sufficient coverage of this area to make everyone feel safe. And you also have lighting that would be up top for the users atop the roadway. We would anticipate having potentially light poles and pedestrian lighting potentially along the pedestrian walkways. We are aware of the city's Dark Skies initiative at the same time, and we have the same thing where down here in Pima County, where we've done several lighting projects, so we're aware of those requirements, and our lighting designers will incorporate that into their designs. So something we'll work through during final design. I don't have a schematic level type concept design yet for it, but something we're aware of and we will work through and incorporate into the project.
Great. I think there's two more questions, and they're sort of wildlife related. I think I know the answer to one of them, so let me handle that one first. So Sally asked if wildlife migration routes have been taken into consideration. So Sally, I work with Arizona Game and Fish often to discuss wildlife migration, especially Hannah Griscom and the staff that she works with. Just because wildlife are in an area does not make it a good area for wildlife migration, is what those professionals would tell me. This area that's smashed between I-40 and the railroad is actually a really dangerous place for wildlife to be. And Game and Fish's preference is often that we take, and I'm thinking of large wildlife like deer, not skunks and prairie dogs. But their preference is that the access of those wildlife to these areas is cut off in a different area, and then they're put into safer paths through and around the city. So we're always thinking about that. We have all of the wildlife migration paths through and around the city mapped. We meet with them when there's any projects that are impacting them. And so that's all part of the consideration. When it comes to prairie dogs, which I don't know if Christine, as the project manager, has had these conversations yet or not. There is some seasonality to removing prairie dogs from construction sites. They have to do it in the right season so that they are not during nesting season and other things. The whole Bnsf corridor through this area does have prairie dogs along it. And what we would do generally, if we were going to work with the groups that do like Habitat Harmony, that voluntarily move prairie dogs, is prior to construction, they come out and do a population assessment, and they have minimum thresholds and minimum criteria for moving a prairie dog colony. So likewise, we don't have any environmental or wildlife biologists at the city. So we rely on those partner agencies to help us make those decisions. So those are just some of the parameters that have come up in previous discussions, but we need to be much closer to a construction date before we engage them in a discussion of timing and moving prairie dogs. And we're still a few years away. Is that correct, Christine?
Yep. I agree with your answer. Thank you so much, Sarah.
No problem. I think those are the two wildlife related questions. I'm looking to see if I missed any other aesthetic questions. A couple of people started messaging directly to some of the co-hosts, and so not everyone has seen your questions. So if you if you look at your question, it says direct message in red next to it. If you'd please go down to the bottom, there's a pull down list, and make sure it's pointing to everyone so that we make sure we get your question covered. But I don't think there's any more. There's another question that we're going to hold until the Q&A at the end, Jason. But if there's no more aesthetic ones will keep going.
Okay, appreciate that. Yeah, I do see the question from Kason, so we will get that at the end. So moving past aesthetics, just want to give everyone what our next steps are.
I'm sorry, if
Oh,
you pause real quick. I think Michelle James had a question regarding the civic spaces. Michelle,
okay.
did you get the answer in the presentation, or do you have a follow-up question? Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Jason.
All right, thank you. So next steps, just to let everyone get an idea of where we are at. We talk a little bit of schedule. So we are finishing up schematic design in the next month or so. So pre-design here on the schedule. What our goals were at schematic were to confirm the project assessment, which was done in 2010 and updated in 2020. We restarted coordination with stakeholders. As I mentioned, we have a lot of stakeholders. We have ADOT and Army Corps of Engineers and Bnsf, all as major stakeholders. We also have the commissions, the public, you guys, mayor and council. We started doing preliminary decision making, and that was refining the geometry of the roadway, doing some structure design, preliminary structure design, structure type, doing roadway design, getting the TIA, the traffic impact analysis, the environmental impact studies, reports done, and then having this public meeting. So those are all the schematic goals. We're getting towards the end of that phase. We should be wrapped up by the end of next month. And then we're going to be heading into final design. We are working towards that final design. We'll have continued coordination with all of our stakeholders, the public, the commissions, mayor and council. We will have ongoing public meetings during this project, so please keep an eye out for additional public meetings as we go forward. We do want to have continued public feedback and incorporation of ideas and comments. We will be finishing field investigations, and we are doing some drilling that's going to be starting up here soon for some borings for geotechnical investigations, and doing some environmental site assessments for some right-of-way acquisitions. We are going to be we will be doing our aesthetics and landscaping and developing those design concepts, and we're going to be finalizing design. We do expect that work to be going through the end of 2022. A lot of that's going to be dependent on several of our stakeholders, with the Army Corps of Engineers and Bnsf being two of our big permit holders. So that schedule is dependent on them. They are part of our critical path. But things right now are, we have a good working relationship with them. So we're hoping that remains favorable, and are confident that we're going to hit that goal. And if that goes well, we should be able to start construction Q1 of 2023 and hit our project goal of construction completion by 2026. That's our planned opening date. So that's our goal, and that's our timeline of what this project is, just to give everyone sort of a snapshot view of our project goals. Now I'll pass it back to Lisa. We'll sort of go over some of the websites and everything.
Great, thanks, Jason. Yes, we do have a project website, and I'd encourage everybody to visit it. It's lonetreeoverpass.org. We're typing that into the chat as well. And I would encourage you to continue to check back onto the website as we'll continue to update it. But on the website, you'll learn more about the project, and you'll be able to access the materials from today's meeting. So if you go to our website, and if you go to the public involvement section, we do have all of the meeting materials, such as the project fact sheet, some display boards, as well as the online survey. We have a virtual meeting room. That's the next tab over, the middle one. And on there, you can go in and view some more of the project displays and more information. The website also has an area where you can sign up for the project distribution list to get the latest updates on the project and notices for public meetings, and then be able to share any comments with the project team. We also have a frequently asked questions section on the website, so you can visit that as well. And then, as we mentioned throughout the meeting, we'd really like to gather your input. We do have an online survey, so you can actually either use the links of surveymonkey.com surveymonkey.com/r/LTO English or surveymonkey.com/r/LTO Spanish to download the surveys, or you can also use the QR codes that are on the screen to go directly to the surveys. We also have a project email address, which is info@lonetreeoverpass.org. So feel free to reach out to the project team with any questions or comments at any time. And then you can also reach our project manager, Christine, as well. Her email address is listed on there. I think she also put that in the chat, and then that's her phone number. So we really encourage you to provide your feedback. We want to hear from you about your thoughts on the design and construction of this project. So I think we'll now move into our question and answer portion. So I was just going to remind everybody that if you would like to ask a question directly to the project team, you can either continue to write that into the chat, or you can use the raise your hand function by clicking on the reactions button in the menu. For those on the phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand. And then once your hand is raised, we'll ask you to unmute. And then for those on the phone, you'll press *6 to mute and unmute your line. So
Laura,
looks
is the link to the SurveyMonkey on the website, or could you post the links to the survey that we want everyone who's here tonight to fill out to the chat?
yes, we can get them posted, but they're also on the project website. So if you go to the public involvement page on the website, they're listed right there, and it says take our survey, and you can go to the online survey, or we actually have a downloadable form with the exact same questions. So if you'd like to fill out the survey that way, there's another option. So
Great. I think we promised to take whoever is on the phone from 940-367-4477 first. So as Flora said, if you wouldn't mind hitting *6, that should unmute you.
yeah, she's gonna unmute them.
I can see you're unmuted. So go ahead and speak.
Yeah, my question was just wanted to confirm the final line will be determined on October 8th. Is that correct for 66 and Lone Tree?
You're talking about the final connection point where it meets 66 between Lone Tree and 66?
Correct. The final line will be determined for property owners in that intersection.
Yeah, so the location we're showing in schematic is going to be fairly close. Everything you see from here on out is going to be just minor changes. So what you've seen on the presentation tonight is going to be very close to what's going to be final design. If we see minor tweaks, it's going to be a couple feet max here or there for grading purposes. So if you look at the slides tonight or look at the visualization where you're seeing that line up on 66, that's pretty much the final design, but outside of minor tweaks during final design or final alignment outside of final design.
Right. Well, I didn't have that ability to see that, but
the project
I'm a property owner.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the project website should have this recording. I'm not sure if we're putting the slideshow up or not, but there was a project rendering as well, which should show where that ties into 66. So you should be able to get to it from the project website.
All right, and that'll be that's the final line. It has been determined.
It could be considered close to. We're not at final design, but yes, that will be where it's tying into 66. Give or take a couple feet maximum here or there, yes.
Okay, so that will be the final line, give or take a little bit here or there.
Correct.
Okay, I'll tomorrow. All right, thank you, Jason.
Yes, thank you.
And Jason, should we get to Kaysen had a good question that was really about how the project would be impacting traffic. Let me get back to our question so I can accurately portray it, though. Kason, you're free to unmute yourself if you'd like to ask it directly. So her question was, how does this plan overall reduce traffic? It seems to distribute traffic only to rejoin 66, which looks like we're just adding 2 extremely busy intersections in a small area. So can someone from the team address sort of the broader traffic impacts?
Yeah, so I can answer this question. So it's a good question. So we have done a traffic impact analysis as part of this project. And what that means is we have looked at how the traffic patterns overall for the travel network in the area are impacted by this project. As part of that project, yes, we do not look at whether this project causes traffic increases or decreases. We have a traffic model that assumes a certain amount of growth per year as we move forward. What that traffic model does show is that traffic patterns are moving traffic mainly from San Francisco and Beaver Street over to Lone Tree. And so it is recreating the travel network, or it's encouraging users to move from the at-grade crossings with Bnsf over to the grade separated crossing. As far as traffic volume goes, we are trying to bring as many enhancements to multimodal users as much as possible. So we are trying to encourage, bicycles and pedestrians where we can. We are designing all of our foot trail connections and our crossings for up to a Class 2 e-bike. So we are aware that there is a shift in the community, and as these bikes improve and get to electric bikes, there's going to be a shift in users potentially. So we're trying and using the NACTO guides. If we can increase enhancement and get that shift of users away from vehicles, that's a potential. There's also potential if we're moving and shifting users from San Francisco and Beaver, it gives the cities options and be outside of this project. And there may be options for the city to look at using those corridors for other uses, where it might be using bike corridors or pedestrian corridors and recapturing that way to, again, encourage more multimodal uses. So while this project goal isn't necessarily specific to reduce traffic, we are trying to bring those enhancements into this project that may encourage a change in pattern of users. So I don't have a direct answer where this project's directly reducing traffic, but we are trying to bring in those outside elements that may encourage people ultimately long-term to reduce traffic. So hope that answers your question. It may not directly, but hope it does. And Jeff and Christine, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
Kason just posted she's not able to unmute herself. Her mic's not working on her computer, Jason. But she also said she really wants to understand how the current path through the neighborhood. The current path, she said, is safe on foot and in bike traffic, and she's worried that the additional traffic will make it less safe. Mostly,
yeah, I'm not
the
sure which
cars and speed.
I'm not sure which neighborhood that would be. So the north section of Lone Tree is elevated, so we're providing other routes through that neighborhood around Lone Tree through the Eldon Corridor. So there's still the east-west connection through that connection. North-south, we're providing the Foots Trail, and we're separating bike lanes and pedestrians off of the roadway. South of Lone Tree, again, we're separating bicycles and pedestrians off of the roadway. At the intersections, we're trying to bring in those NACTO ideas as much as possible, and where it's practical and feasible to enhance the safety. So multimodal safety and use is the focus of our design team. It has been from the beginning, and we bring it up in every design team meeting of where can we bring these enhancements in. And it's been an ongoing goal and focus. So we're trying to bring those enhancement features and safety features of every design decision we make. So I'm not sure exactly where your neighborhood is, so south of Lone Tree to Brennan. So
she lives in the western portion of the south side.
Yeah, so access to downtown, like I said, we're moving a lot of vehicles off of San Francisco and Brennan, so their volumes, I don't have the volumes offhand right now, but I believe they're dropping quite a bit, almost, I want to say 40 or 50%. I have the slides, or I have the volumes offhand. I didn't bring them with me, but there are quite a bit. So you're gonna see a significant reduction on those two streets. So those are the streets you're using. You're gonna have a lot less cars on those two streets. We're making Lone Tree the vehicular focus and creating those other pathways on San Francisco and Beaver. They're reducing quite a bit of traffic. So that's your route. That should actually be a lot safer route from you moving forward after this project, at least in the near term, the opening year 2026. If you give me a second, I can get those volume reductions for opening year. I just didn't have it open at this time.
I don't see any other questions in the chat. Is there anyone who has a question? You can at this point raise your hand and I can unmute you if you'd like a chance to ask your question out loud.
Sarah, did you see the question from Sally Page?
Yes, Sally, I think that goes back to the original piece of there's really only skunks and prairie dogs in this area, except for some of those larger mammals. And really Game and Fish has not made a request to accommodate that in this area. And that's who we go to, mostly because they want to see wildlife movement occurring much further east and west than this location. The wildlife that ends up in downtown ends up stranded, ends up injured, often ends up run over by a fast moving train. And so at the request of the wildlife biologist, we wouldn't be making those accommodations in a location like this.
Yeah, and Sarah, she had a follow-up question to that regarding Arizona wool growers have dedicated sheep driveways that are decades old. How do they come into play? And
they aren't in this area necessarily. They're in fact, I'm not sure there's any of the driveways come within a mile or two of Flagstaff. The Monterey sheep one goes down through the Woody Mountain area and out through the Verde Valley. And then the other sheep driveway is further east of Flagstaff towards Winslow. Annie did have a question. She wants to understand the council meeting on the 8th, that maybe it's the 8th, maybe it's the next council meeting on this, I guess. Maybe Christine, you know the date. What is actually that step that council will be taking when they are presented something from this team next?
So thanks, Sarah. They don't have an action item, and it's on October 19th, and it'll be a similar discussion and presentation from tonight, but we will dive a little bit further into the technical details on the traffic modeling and the counts. Also, the greenhouse gas emissions. This is a very dense and heavy topic, and I really appreciate the group kind of hanging with us. It's a little difficult to be able to provide the information that the public and council wants, and also keep it at a conversational level. So we won't be asking them to act on anything on the 19th. It will just be a presentation kind of similar to what you've seen tonight. And if you would, please go to the survey and fill it out. And part of that survey, I'd like to hear, how can we do better to clarify our message? And what do you want to hear more about or less about in these presentations on the project? I think that would be helpful, so we can kind of continue to fine tune, how we're interacting with different groups in different manners and at different levels. So thank you.
There's also a question from Andrea. Let me see if a couple came in at once. She's asked if she's understanding correctly, the Eldon Corridor incorporates separated bike lanes and ped crossings of Butler to Lone Tree to downtown to allow a crossing alternative and avoid crossing the intersection. So instead, I'm not sure I understand what the Eldon Corridor is. when you see the Eldon Corridor on these drawings, it looks very vague right now. It's like the polka dots in the slides that we were just going past. And that's because there's not a design for it yet. What we've heard from some people is that the vehicle access there is very important. And what we've heard from other folks is that the bike and pet access should be paramount, and that maybe there should be no vehicles or very limited vehicle access. And so those are two things we've heard from different groups that are in a trade-off. And so there's actually, if you go to the survey, a specific question where we ask for your feedback on the Eldon Corridor and what it should accomplish. So the reason you're not getting clarity from this presentation on the Eldon Corridor is we don't have clarity on it yet. We know that this is something that was part of the design work, and we're asking for your feedback on it. And that's why the survey is so important. I know we didn't put up what the questions are here, but we do have some really tailored questions for the things that the project team here is still working towards more clarity and design on. And then Kaysen had a comment in the chat, but I don't see a question. So Lisa will be saving the chat from today. So if you do have a comment that you just want to put in the chat, we'll get a comment. We'll get a copy of that. It won't be lost at the end of the meeting. Are there any other questions? I think we've answered all the ones I've seen. I know Christine and Jeff have also been scouring to make sure I'm not missing any.
I think we're good, but please, again, I can't say it enough. Everybody reach out directly to me, and we can set up time to go over the plans. I'll come out to your properties, whatever helps with your understanding of the project. So. Okay, Lisa, did you have any final comments or Jason?
I just want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. We had some very valuable feedback that we really appreciate, and we do appreciate the questions. It always makes us think of things from a different perspective. So it is very appreciative of all your input and valuable feedback. So we do appreciate your time, and hope we were able to answer some questions and bring some insight on what this project is doing. And thank you all for joining us tonight. And Lisa's having some technical difficulties again, so.
Okay, thank you, everyone.